On this episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, I'm going to educate you on everything you need to know before you get your hands on one of these bad boys. Woo-hoo-hoo, yeah! Welcome everyone to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. And on this episode, we are focusing on none other than the Mitsubishi Evo Lancer, or the Evolution or Evolution Lancer, whatever you'd like to call it. This is the CT9A chassis from Mitsubishi. Now guys, if you're new to the channel, my name is Kurt. This is Eat, Sleep, Drive. I make a video that comes out every Friday, so if you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button and stick around. But anyways, back to the Evo. Now, I've talked about this car in my prior videos for a couple of reasons, mainly because it's super fun to drive and it's actually pretty quick, but secondly, they're starting to appreciate and value. It's a car that you can get into, and if you keep it in good condition and keep it in good running order without rust and stuff like that, you're not gonna lose any money on it. Now, I'm not delusional. I don't think that these are gonna be as collectible as things like the Supra and the NSX, stuff like that. It's not gonna be on that level, but slowly these will go up in value and you won't lose any money on them. So here's what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna give you everything you need to know about this CT9A chassis. The first thing that we're gonna do is talk about the differences in model years. 03 to 06 are when these cars were produced in the US, and we're gonna talk about all the improvements and all the changes that they made over the years. Then we're gonna get into what you should look out for with common problems of these cars, common issues that come up during ownership that you should look at when you are looking at a prospective car to buy. And then lastly, I'm gonna leave you with my thoughts on which model years and specifically submodels of the Evo I think are going to be the most desirable long-term and are just kind of the most fun to drive. So we're gonna cover those three things today. Let's dive in. As I alluded to before, the CT9A chassis was broken up into two categories, the Evo 8 and the Evo 9. The Evo 8 is what we're gonna start with, and that was produced from 2003 to 2005. Now, all of those cars had the 4G63 engine with some minor tweaks. Let's start with the 2003 and 2004 model. They had a 4G63 producing 271 horsepower. It was the first iteration in the Evo 8. And the base Evo of 2003 was really the only option. There was one car that you could buy, and that's just how it came in 2003. In 2004, they introduced two more models. So they had the base car, then they also had the RS, and then they also had the SSL package. So let's talk briefly about the SSL package. Sunroof, sound, and leather. That's what that stands for. So you got a sunroof, you got a subwoofer, an upgraded kind of sound system, and leather with the SSL package. So it's a little more of like your premium Evo. Now, the RS on the other hand, I think is quite desirable because of the low production numbers. They only made a couple hundred of these things. And what does the RS mean? Well, it is basically your stripped down rally version. It's made to be a race car. It didn't come with any of the frills. And I'm gonna read off right now all the things that they deleted from the RS just to save weight. And I have to read it off because there's so many things that I'm gonna forget something. So the RS deletes the audio system, ABS, rear wing, power windows, power locks, power mirrors, sound deadening, trunk compartment trim, rear wiper, map lights, rear assist handles, parking brake handle leather, center console lid, and keyless entry system. What did the RS come with? I mean, basically there's nothing left with that car. So super stripped down bare bones car made for racing, lightweight. It was much lighter than the other Evos, given all the stuff that was taken away. You did, however, get two features with the RS that were of note. First of all, you got an aluminum roof, once again to keep down weight. Definitely roof weight, being a high center of gravity, is quite important. So aluminum roof knocked down the weight a little bit. And you also got a front limited slip differential, which was also a pretty big deal. And we'll see that in some other models later down the line. So that's basically your 2003 to 2004 offerings. Now moving on to the 2005 model year. This is the last model year for the Evo 8. And it had a few changes, specifically with the engine for all of the models in its lineup. It was still the 4G63, but it had a revised turbo, So that was making 5 more horsepower at 276. And also you had things like the ACD pump, which was added, which can control the torque split from front to rear on the car. That's where you'll see those 2005 and later model year cars having like a tarmac, gravel, and snow setting, which adjust how much power goes to the front or rear. One other important feature that Mitsubishi made standard in 2005 was the limited slip front differential. This was something that was typically only installed on the upper tier models, but is now made standard for all Evos going forward. So those were all introduced in 2005. You still got the RS model, you still got the SSL model, but they also added the MR model for the first time. MR stands for Mitsubishi Racing, and it wasn't so racy as the RS. It came with more features than less. The most notable changes for the MR were a revised suspension, an aluminum roof, like we saw with the RS, and then probably the biggest change was the 6-speed manual transmission. Now we're gonna talk more about this 6-speed manual later in the episode, but know that all the previous cars had a 5-speed manual, and the 05 MR was the first one with a 6-speed. The car also came with some other changes like BBS wheels, which were lighter and definitely made the car look tougher. But that was the last model year for the Evo 8. So let's talk about the Evo 9. Now finally we have reached the last Evo CT9A, the Evo 9. It was produced for 1 year in 2006. And some of the big changes that came for this car really involved the engine. The engine got MyVec, which is basically variable valve timing similar to VTEC, and it also got a further revised turbo than we saw before. They revised the compressor side this time, and all these changes ended up making another 10 horsepower. We're up to 286 for the Evo 9. So it made a little more power, but also they changed the look of the car. They changed the front bumper, and I think most people will agree that the Evo 9 is the best looking CT9A. Now obviously I'm a little biased because I own one, but I think most of you will agree. Now the same models were offered in 2006 as 2005. The SSL, the base car, the RS, the MR, those were all offered, but they added another model for 2006, and that is the SE. And that is what this car is. Now the SE was sort of a mix between the MR and the SSL to a certain extent. You got the MR wheels, you got the MR aluminum roof, but you continued to get the 5-speed, and you also got things like some upgraded stitching on the seats, so the interior was a little bit nicer, and you also got HID headlights again, which is something that they took away from the base car later in those model years. So the SE is sort of a blend between the MR and SSL, at least that's how I look at it, and it's only offered in 2006. Is your head spinning yet with all the model year differences? I know mine is, and don't worry, we're finally done with all the model year differences. We've got sort of the mundane stuff out of the way, but hopefully you have a better idea of what model suits you best or which model you would like. But I'm basically tired of just standing around the car talking. I want to go for a drive, so let's go for a drive and then we'll talk about some of the common problems of the Evo 8 and 9. Yeah! All right, guys, now we're in the car. Let's make some noise, let's have some fun, and let's talk about some of the weak points of the Evo, because despite how fun these cars are, they do have some weak points, unfortunately. The main one being rust. Rust is really the Achilles heel to Mitsubishi Evos. And now you have other Japanese cars like Subaru STIs, which kind of suffer the same fate, but not nearly as bad as Evos. Like STIs rust too, but like the protection, the quality of metal that Mitsubishi used on these cars is so poor. So if you find a car that spent its whole life in the north, been driven in the winters and stuff, it's gonna be a rusty pile and you wanna stay away from it. So find a southern car, find something from friggin' desert if you can, because these cars even have recalls on the front K members. Front K member is what holds the engine up, like kind of the front cradle. And there's literally a recall because these rust out. So look out for those when you're looking at these cars. Look at the rear subframe area. Like the rear of these cars tends to rust really bad too. And I mean, it will effectively be useless once it rusts out, right? So the big thing that you need to look out for over everything else is rust, because you can basically fix everything else, but it's really hard to fix a really rusty car. So, rust. Next thing, transmission and gearbox. What I just did, shift. God, this car's fast. So part of these things being so fast with minimal mods, part of the problem with that is the weak point then becomes the transmission and the transfer case. Now, Super STIs, they have a different engine layout. They don't need a transfer case. This is a front wheel drive engine layout, so therefore you need a transfer case to get power to the rear wheels. And that adds a little bit of complexity and another failure point, unfortunately. And these transfer cases and gearboxes are known for being a little bit weak in these cars. If you repeatedly launch them, if you shift, like bang shift, do all kinds of stuff like that, you're gonna have issues with the transmissions. More so in the 6-speed cars. I mentioned earlier the Evo MRs had the 6-speed manual. Those are known to be even more fragile than the 5 speeds. So definitely something to keep an eye and ear out for. You're gonna want to listen for gear whine and just like odd noises when you drive a car to see if the transfer case or gearbox is on the way out. Obviously check to see if the it shifts good, the synchros are good and stuff like that. And just get a feel for how the car was treated. If it's been autocrossed a lot, that means it's been launched a lot, and hard launches are really tough on these gearboxes and transfer cases. So that's really number 2. The third thing is the ACD pump. I mentioned the ACD pump in the 05 and 06 cars. They, no matter what environment you are in, they tend to corrode and become an issue. This person just does not care. Wow, okay. The ACD pump is an issue with these cars. They corrode, and then you'll get a flashing yellow light on the dash, or all your tarmac, gravel, and snow lights will be lit up. Sometimes it just requires service, sometimes it requires replacing it. They're not hatefully expensive like a transmission, but it is something to look out for. And the last thing I'll say this is less like a flaw of the car, but just something you should look out for, is do a compression test. Any car you buy, ideally you should do a compression test on, but some cars are harder than others to do a compression test on. Getting to all the spark plugs on my BMW M3, which is an E90 V8, is a big job, costs a lot of money, a lot of time or whatever. On an Evo, the spark plugs are right there. It literally takes 5 minutes to do a compression test. And a compression test will give you a general feeling of the health of the engine. If all the cylinders are within 3 to 5% of compression of each other, you can be pretty confident that the engine is pretty healthy. So it's just a quick, easy way to check to make sure that the engine is healthy, because a lot of these cars are pretty heavily modified and have seen a lot of abuse. So it's something you want to look out for. And to that extent, ideally you want to buy one that's closer to stock. Just from a collectability and reliability standpoint, it's very tempting to get some of these super high horsepower ones, but I ended up buying one that just has all the bolt-ons, makes 400 horsepower relatively reliably, and is super fun. You don't need to go beyond a stock turbo, at least in the Evo 9s, in my opinion. So look out for those things and you should be fine. Evos are great cars. So we've talked about all the model year differences. We've talked about some of the shortcomings of the car. Let's talk about which one you want to buy, at least in my opinion, for long-term collectability or just enjoyment. Which one is the best? Well, if you look at the production numbers, I think those are pretty telling, because anytime you start talking about collectible cars, you want to know how many were produced. There were less than 1,000 RSs produced. So that's the first car I'm going to talk about. The RS, once again, is the stripped down rally version. And while that's not a car you would want to daily drive by any means, typically when it comes to collectible cars, the special race version, that was limited production, can be pretty desirable, and I hardly ever find any on the market. So I think RSs are going to be pretty desirable with their sort of motorsports inspired heritage. Now, that's not to say there aren't other cars that I think will be desirable. More specifically, the Evo 9 MR. It's just such an iconic car. It's the last of the CT9A, so it's got the best engine, it's got all the best suspension stuff. Like basically every one of the best parts was installed on the Evo 9 MR. It had the 6-speed manual, and despite being, you know, potentially weaker than the 5-speed, I still think it's just an overall more desirable car. It looks the best, it drives the best, it is basically the best CT9A made. So the Evo 9 MR is going to be very desirable. One just sold on Bring a Trailer, by the way, for 37 grand, which, like, a low mileage, nice example. So that kind of shows you that they're already going for more money than they were new, which is pretty wild. Now the third car I'm going to talk about, just in general, if you can't get the RS, you can't get the Evo 9 MR, is going to be just an Evo 9 in general. The Evo 9 only being made for one model year, 2006. They did make a bunch of them, but if you could buy any Evo 9, even if it's on MR, you get all the best features. The Evo 9 base car is great. The SE is great. Like, all of the Evo 9s are really, really great. So if you get your hands on Evo 9, that's another great one. Now, once again, guys, there's not a bad Evo here, and I would prioritize no rust over everything else. Like, I would rather have a base 2003 no rust car than a rusty RS or a rusty Evo 9 MR. Like, you got to prioritize condition and stuff like that. If it's rust free, that's a great buy regardless. They're all fantastic to drive. We're just really nitpicking here as far as like which model is best. Now, certainly I'm biased. I bought an Evo 9. I think it has the most collectability. I think it looks the best. Once again, is most fun to drive. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below about the CT9A chassis. Which one is your favorite? What are your memories about this car? I would love to hear about that in the comment section. I have a lot of memories of this car because I was in high school when these cars were like kind of coming out and getting really popular. So this is a bit of a dream car to me. If you haven't seen the previous video where I went and bought this, go check it out. Also, if you like BMW M3 content, if you like FRS content, or even off-road stuff like Land Cruiser, I have those on my channel as well, so check out those videos too. Couple plans for this car coming up. Stay tuned for more Evo content in the future. I appreciate you guys watching as always. This is Eat Sleep Drive. My name is Kurt. I'll see you on the next episode. This car is dumb fast. E85, our Lord and Savior, E85. Smells so good. Smell that corn. Oh.